All right. And then he told everyone that he was with, and they actually asked the tour guide where Second Corinth was, and he sent me the video of it. It's really funny. So I was really proud of it, but I expected a little bit more from you guys, is what I'm saying. So I have to start off by thanking Pastors Manny and Pastor Victoria, because when they came to take over this church years ago, I can't even remember how many years it's been, 1 billion. There's 7 now. They saw something in me. They saw something in the whole team, really, that I don't think we saw in ourselves. And I remember the first time that Pastor Manny said, I want you to preach to what I'm talking about. And this morning, what I'm going to be talking about relates directly to just that, me arguing with Pastor Manny, my spiritual father, what I saw versus what he saw. And so I want to thank them. Because if I only was able to achieve what I saw in myself, then I would be really nowhere, and my family would suffer for it, my wife would suffer for it, and I'm grateful to have pastors who are also parents who push, who see in us what we don't see in ourselves. And while sometimes it's challenging, I wouldn't have it any other way. So thank you, Pastor Manny and Pastor Victoria. I hope you guys are having the time of your life. We love you and we miss you. All right, so let me tell you a story really quick that I don't think I've ever shared. I don't even know if I've shared it with my wife. It's nothing like time Dad would be coming home, which was 7 or 8, and bedtimes, I don't know if that was normal we didn't have a bedtime. And we would hide, and then we'd hear the door open, and we would know immediately when my dad walked in whether or not he was in a good mood or a bad mood. And the way that he would let us know is if he was in a good mood, we would hear singing, and my dad could not sing. But I don't know, maybe I'm gonna age myself a little bit. But there's this old song that it would come on, that we were gonna have kind of a fun night, and then what my dad would do is he would go, oh, 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 because in the song, that's what the guy did. And we ignored the smell of alcohol. We ignored the stumbling. We ignored all of that because Dad was in a good mood. And we didn't always have safety. We didn't always feel safe. So when he came in and we heard that, we knew that things were going to be okay. And then he would get down on the ground and he would crawl around, and we would take turns getting on his back and seeing how long we could stay. Mom was frustrated, and she loaded us all in the car. She said, we're going to go find Dad. And so she drives around. There wasn't GPS or anything back when I was younger. And so she would drive around, and I didn't know how she knew where to drive or where to look, but she knew where to look. And then we pulled into a parking lot, and then we saw his car, and she said, Andy, go in and see what your dad's doing. And I walked into a bar. And before I could see my dad, I could hear my dad. Because I heard, hey there, little. And I did not like it. And I remember in that moment thinking, what could I have done differently? What could have changed? What could I change? Could I have been funnier? Could I be cuter? Could I be more fun at home? Maybe if I behaved better? Dad would have come home, and he wouldn't be sitting with this lady right now, but instead he'd be singing that song with me, and we wouldn't be driving around. And I had this moment where I felt abandoned. I felt lost, and I felt pushed away, but I was little, and I didn't know how to express that to anybody. There's something about the voice and the actions of a father that will change the direction of a child. It'll change the way that you go. And I think in a lot of ways that changed a lot of my behavior from that point forward. When my dad would come home, he wouldn't sing that song anymore. It was ruined. He would try to make it fun, but I noticed as the years went on that he just came home a little more angry most of the time, so we just knew to stay in our room. You could register your child for school with a baptism certificate, any kind of religious document you wanted in the 80s and 90s, which is very important to the story I'm about to tell. Because on my first day of high school, I went to homeroom, and you guys know the deal on the first day of high school. the teacher calls roll, and they go down the list, and they call out the names. And then at the end, they say, is there anybody I didn't call? Yeah? And then most of the time, it's like, okay, this is a silly question. Of course you're going to call everybody. You're a big school. You got it all together. And then on the first day of high school, they went down the list, and they did not call my name. And I raised my hand. I said, they didn't call my name. And she said, what's your name? Well, I went by Andy Dennis from as long as I can remember. Andrew James Dennis. And then she said, well, you need to go to the office, and we got to figure this out. Your name is Donald Andrew McMahon, and Jerry's not your real dad. I'll talk to you when you get home. I love you. Bye. Click. Guys, my mind was blown. Everything that my dad favored my little sister over us. Oh, why did I get punished worse than my younger brother and sister? Oh, I understand now. Everything's starting to make sense. And I didn't trust anybody, and I wanted to fight everyone, and I was really little. And I didn't trust anybody, and I wanted to fight everyone, and I was really little because I didn't have my first growth spurt until my third year of 10th grade. So I was like, yes, I was angry, and so I rebelled, and so I stayed in. Tell me, why didn't he love me? Was it because something I already believed? I wasn't cute. I wasn't funny. He stayed when my sister was born, but when I was born is when he took off. So something's not right with me, because then my why? At 15 years old, I confirmed the orphan spirit in me. And everything I did from that point forward was in the mindset of, I better be careful. Because you never know who's gonna, and if I'm not careful, what I will do is try to blame myself. This thing inside of me, this brokenness inside of me, everything that I touch fails. Everything that I've ever tried has been good for a little while, but then not succeeded. And here I am, broken and alone. And so I need to be careful, because if I get close to you, you're gonna get hurt too. Why do I push away? Why do I isolate? Why do I just go ahead and cut it off before it could hurt anymore? This relationship is getting too much. I jumped all around. The title of my sermon, I'm aware that the term orphan spirit can get some bad publicity. And I want to be very gentle in my approach. Anyone who has dealt with abandonment has a spirit of orphan on them, and we just have to pray for them. And what I'm learning is that's not true. You have to love the person. And so today I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to call it their fault. So this morning, if you've ever been in a situation where you felt like something was your fault, but it very much is not your fault, don't worry about it. You don't know God as a father. We sang it earlier. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend to me. So then I started to transplant that onto my father. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that we've experienced like a bad divorce at home or something happened with our real dad or abandonment issues like me. It just means that somewhere along the way, a trust was broken in the natural. I'm not here to bring guilt or throw shame on dads. What I'm here is to try to expose something, show love, and see if we can't extract something this morning. Does that make sense? So technically, the first orphan in history is Satan. Yeah? So he becomes prideful. He becomes jealous of the worship that God is getting. And he wants some of that for himself. Him too much credit. But I also don't want to give him not enough, because he is throwing accusations at you. Says, I want to be clear on that. Sometimes he doesn't have to make up a lie about me. He just has to point out what I've done. And if I'm not careful, I fall into that trap of this orphan spirit of going, well, if I could have been better, if I could have done this differently, then God would love me more. And if God would love me more, then my life would be going better, and my bank account would be bigger, my car wouldn't have, right? And this is the crux of it. Because of the enemy's deception, Adam and Eve became orphans. Okay? An orphan is anyone without a father. And this is where people shut off because they think, well, I have a dad. Please don't. Because I'll point back to Adam and Eve. They have a really, really good dad. Genesis 3, verses 7 and 8 says, we're at the point where they had eaten the apple. And it says, then the eyes of both were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves sin on their own, or they attempted to. And then they hid from their father. And we've been repeating that pattern ever since. We recognize that there's something wrong in our lives, and instead of trying to figure out what that is, or going to the Father with this idea and trying to find out how we can improve the situation in our life. Not just because it's where they lived. That's a big part of home. But has anyone lived somewhere and not been home? Home is where the presence of the Father is. Home is where there's love, peace, joy, security, abundance. Home is where you feel safe. And then they lie to themselves and say that it's the fear of the Lord. As an orphan, it is impossible to tell the difference between the fear of the Lord and the fear of his presence. So I want to talk about Moses for a minute. Killed. And so what happens is the mother of Moses, after she weans him, she has to throw him into a river. If we could look back on some of our lives, if we could get an overhead view, we would realize that sometimes our parents did the very best that they could. With what they were given, they did everything that they could. It's not because they hated us. It's not because they just because, she said, I drew him out of the water. So when your name means drawn out of the water, it's safe to assume that, sorry guys, I dropped that. It's safe to assume that you were adopted. We also see in Exodus 2, the Bible says that he went out to his people and looked on their burdens. And then when he saw and that he knew. Okay, so he murdered that he knew. Okay, so he murdered the guy, and then the next day he saw two people fighting, and he said, why are you guys doing this? And they said, who made you the judge of everybody? Are you gonna kill us too? And he went, uh-oh. And he took off. He's walking through a desert. You're gonna set them free, and I'm gonna use you. And I think in our church and in the world today, and then Moses has a reply. Moses says to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? He says, I'm not the one. It's the same thing that I said to Pastor Manny 7 years ago, is I'm gonna be with you. If you go to verse 12, he says, but I will be with you, and this shall be a sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. God is awesome. He's saying, I'm not gonna leave you. So I'm gonna be with you. But Moses isn't buying that. Why would an orphan believe that? Everyone has left. Yeah, I'm not the only one that when someone starts to get close, immediately I say, that feels too painful already. It's gonna hurt too much. So what I'm gonna do is just get close, make some friends, and then push you away because I can't deal with the pain anymore. I felt it, and I can just protect myself by not getting close. So who's gonna listen to me? I'm just this guy. Remember, the accuser has been whispering lies in his ears for 40 years. He has been alone. He's been in a desert. He has been trying to navigate life, only knowing that he is an orphan, and he has been Turn around and look at them. All right, that's really my typo. We believe everyone sees me how I see myself. I said we and then I. I believe that everyone will see me how I see myself. My biggest fear is that everyone will see me how I see myself. Because if you guys see what I see, things are gonna get ugly quick. And now please let us go a 3 days journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So you don't have to read that. I will stretch out my hand. It says, this is what I'm gonna do. I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. And after that, he will let you go. God is saying, and the orphan spirit will always say they won't accept me. It's our default. When we feel rejection, our expectations are lowered so we don't feel disappointment anymore. Right? The minute that anybody tells me that something is going to happen, hey, here's what's going to happen. You're going to do this, this, and this. Immediately I go, maybe, but probably not. Because, I've failed at just about everything. Anything that I've ever touched has failed. So you're saying that will happen, but it probably won't. And why do I do that? Because it's safer. It's less painful than believing that something could happen that might fall through. We begin to reject before we're asked, because it's easier to pre-reject than to feel the sting of rejection. I did this when I found out my real dad left. I began to self-sabotage every relationship that I had. I remember some of my closest friends still to this day. I stopped talking to them. I was in high school and I stopped talking to, it's Matthew and Omar. They're my guys. They're my ride and die. Omar is still my best friend. America, we church hop all the time. This is why we're on marriage 2, 3, 4, 5. This is why every friendship is a little bit distant because getting close is hard. This is why our marriages, even if we're in them, are falling apart because right now it's easier just to reject things. This is why even when you're listening to me right now, what you're actually doing is thinking that there's somebody else that needs to hear what I'm saying and you're not thinking about how it can apply to your life. Because you're rejecting the idea, because it's easier than going through what you might have to go through to get there. This is why it's easier to accept that maybe your kids may never talk to you again. We begin to accept things because it's easier than going through the pain of trying to fix things. And what he threw it on the ground. It became a serpent and Moses ran from it, but the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. So he put out his hand and caught it and it became a staff in his hand. Or listen to the first sign. They may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. Okay, let's pause for a minute. For 40 years, Moses has been utterly alone. Found a wife, probably still feeling alone, and now he's having a conversation with God. Not only is he having a conversation with God, his staff has turned into a serpent and then turned back into a staff. He's caught leprosy and been healed from leprosy. And then been told that he's going to pour water out and it's going to become blood. It's crazy, right? I'm just thinking about it for a minute, make sure I'm not missing anything. It's crazy that life is lonely, out of nowhere, burning bush, doesn't burn up. Oh my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant in the last however long, hour. But I am slow of speech and tongue. The orphan spirit will always say, I'm not good enough. I don't have what it takes. This is what rejection will do in your life. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of what you have to offer. You shouldn't use me. I'll screw it up. I've screwed everything up. Don't. I'm trying to save you, God, from looking like a fool. Because if you use me, you're going to look dumb, because anybody who's ever asked me to do anything has looked dumb. So just trust me. I know me. You don't know me, but I've been here. I've been in this body. I've been in this skin, and I promise you, I'm going to mess this up. Have we had this conversation with God before? God does not give up. So God basically says, listen, I'm not going to brag or anything. And so in verse 11, it says, who's made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Hey, and Moses is like, I don't know. And this is what he replies. He says, oh, my Lord, please send somebody else. Because the orphan spirit will always say, I will fail. But to be truthful, the idea of failing never crossed my mind as an orphan. It was actually just the idea of being a failure. I never thought that I could fail at something and not be We're going to make it. Yeah, I just looked at the clock. We're going to make it. We are all born spiritual orphans. We are all born spiritual orphans. And so I think it's important to remember that God treats us how he treats Jesus. Remember at Jesus' baptism, and here's an account of what happened in Matthew 3. Verse 17, Jesus goes down to the river to be baptized, and then he comes up from the water. And in verse 17 it says, and behold, a voice from heaven said, this is my beloved son, with whom I am well pleased. This is what God sees in you. So check it out. We have identity. Not who we are. It's whose we are. He's saying, this is my son. You want to say, this is my son. He says, in whom? He says, he's in me. His placement. That's where I belong. And then he says, I am well pleased. That's affirmation. That's how my Father sees me. A father will always validate relationships. If we can grasp that, if we can walk into that, we can defeat the enemy's tactics immediately. Nothing can stop us at that point, right? Because what God is saying, I don't care if you were cute. I don't care if you were funnier. I don't care about that stuff that you question all of the time. You don't need to win more trophies. You don't need to achieve more. All I need you to know is that you are my son or daughter. Slavery, to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. We are children of God. And if children, then heirs. Heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ. Mm-hmm. Paul says, sons, that means is we either get the inheritance or we serve the meals. This is paramount to our life as Christians. We're born spiritual orphans. I'm going to get into the story of the prodigal son for just a minute. Because I literally just have a minute. He's living with pigs and eating what the pigs eat. And then what he does, he starts practicing his orphan speech. Have we done this before? I'm going to go to Luke 15, 17. Day, okay? But when he came to himself, he said, what Paul is saying there is you don't have that option. You're a son, and you're always going to be a son. It doesn't matter what you mess up. It doesn't matter what you believe about yourself. You cannot fall back into fear. It's actually impossible. You've received the spirit of adoptions, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. Abba is like the greatest term of endearment. This is what my babies call me. This is when I think back about what I miss about my kids when they first, Dad. They didn't know anything else about me. They didn't know that I had anger issues. They didn't know that I was broken too. All they knew that I was Dada. And we cry, Abba, Father. And so he got up and he went to his father. And while I talked about this earlier, when he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion. Wait, that says compassion. Why didn't it say anger? Right? That's what we think, right? When I was a long way off, the father, I've sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And the father said to his servants before he could even finish, quickly, get the best robe and put it on, and put a ring on his hand, and put shoes on his feet. Here's what he's saying. Get a robe. Cover that stench. He smells like a whorehouse. Let's redeem that. We're not just his physical nakedness, but let's reinstate his honor. Put a ring on his finger, because he still has an inheritance. Because I'm not trying to earn anything from anybody. I'm not serving to be liked or to be loved. I'm doing this because my father and my mother believe in me enough to put shoes on my feet. So celebrate what God has done in my life, because there is a robe on my back. There is a ring on my finger, and I've got shoes on my feet. So now I can walk in knowing that I am an heir of God. I live in his kingdom. Party going, and the brother goes to a servant. Party going, and the brother goes to a servant. He goes, what is happening? And the servant goes, your brother is home. He was lost, but now he's found. Your brother's home. And he gets mad. What does the Bible say? We can't be slaves and sons. He's an orphan too. What he's doing is, Jesus tells this story for a lot of reasons, and I'm not getting into any of it, but I think one reason is that Jesus knew as long as we lived as orphans, that even if we do the right thing, we're doing it for the wrong reason. So let's go to the Last Supper. We're going to do this. This is going to be great. I remember I said, as long as we live as orphans, even if we do the right thing, we do it for the wrong reasons. And Jesus makes this statement in John 14. He's promising them the Holy Spirit. He says, if you look to you. And see, Jesus knew what was at stake, because he knew what he was about to endure. And he knew that there was a torture that was coming. And he knew that there was embarrassment, separation from his Father. And he said, I'm going to become an orphan for a minute. I'm going to hang on the cross. I'm going to yell, my God, my God. The same thing that Moses did. God, I'm not good enough. Choose somebody else, because I got a that's funny. I stuttered when I was saying stutter. I got a stutter and a lisp. God, I can't do this. Pastor Manny, a lot of stupid questions so that we could be adopted into the kingdom of heaven. So I don't know where you are this morning. And can we close our eyes and bow our heads? If you want to be a son of God, then what I'm going to do is count to 3, and I want you to raise your hand high in the air proud. And the only person that's going to see is me. And then we'll see where we go from there. If you're wanting to accept Jesus Christ into your heart as your Lord and Savior, raise your hand on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you. I see you. And the second thing is, maybe you're realizing this morning for the first time that there are elements of your life where you've been living as an orphan, where you're not believing in yourself what God wants to see in you, where you see something different than God sees. Maybe your biggest fear is that people will see in you what you see in yourself. And what I would do is I would open these altars. I would open these altars this morning, and what I want is I know that we're just a little bit over, but I don't want anybody to come up. You can. Let's let people come up first, and then we'll come up behind them. And I'll wait here for a minute. I know this is heavy. Out and ran to him and grabbed him and gave him a hug. And I feel prophetically in the house this morning that that's what's actually happening is as you start to walk down to this altar, what's happening is the Father is seeing you. And before even the prayer team gets to you, what's happening is you're going to feel a warm embrace from the Father, who he's giving you a hug, and he's saying, you're home. Start the party, because he was dead, but now he's alive. Kill the calf. Start the fire, because we've got to get something going in here. And there's a celebration. Begin to pray. Let's begin to intercede for the people up here getting prayer. Begin to pray. Let's begin to intercede for the people up here getting prayer.